Today, we're going to talk about something we all need, but we often resist: boundaries, restraint, and why wisdom isn't optional. This is not just about behavior, it's about life and death, flourishing or falling, healing or repeating cycles. So, if you've ever felt like your life keeps cycling back to the same pain and the same mistakes and the same patterns, this message is for you. Proverbs 6 gives us a wisdom map, and we're going to trace it through the stories of Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and even David's cry in Psalm 27. So let's start with Proverbs 6, 1 through 5, right? It opens with a warning against becoming entangled in someone else's debts, co-signing a loan, or binding yourself to a promise you can't control. Right? So this might seem like financial advice, but it's actually deeply spiritual. Proverbs 6, 1 through 3, if you have shaken hands in pledge, go and humble yourself, right? So this is about knowing the limits of your responsibility. It's about healthy detachment. Because God did not design you to carry what is not yours. And yet, how many of us live codependent, boundaryless? Totally no boundaries in our lives, especially when we've been shaped by trauma or raised to think self-sacrifice equals love, right? So Proverbs is pleading, run, free yourself. And this echoes Genesis 21, where Sarah asks Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away. It's a hard passage, but God says something that might surprise us. In Genesis 21:12, do whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac your offspring will be reckoned. Now listen closely. God is not discarding Hagar or Ishmael. In fact, he provides for them in the wilderness, but he affirms that boundaries, even painful ones, are part of his plan. And here's the deal. Like, not every relationship is going to stay in your inner circle. Some have to be released, right? And not every path is yours to follow. Some doors need to close. And now let's look at Proverbs 6, 6 through 11. The ant and the sluggard. We hear this and think hustle culture, right? But that misses the point. Proverbs 6, 6, go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. Well, what is an ant's wisdom, right? It prepares in advance, it discerns the season, and it does not need someone hovering to make it do what's right? It's self-governance, which is another word for spirit-led restraint. And so now we look at Genesis 22, where Abraham on the mountain, knife in hand, hearing the voice of God say, do not lay a hand on the boy. This is restraint in the most literal and heartbreaking sense, right? Abraham does not act on emotion. He listens. He waits for the voice. He doesn't push past God's instruction, right? So, friends, this is not willpower. This is surrender, right? And when we talk about neuroscience, here's the kicker on that one. Your prefrontal cortex is your seat of wisdom and restraint. And it will go offline when your limbic system is hijacked by stress, trauma, or threat, right? So when Proverbs says, don't sleep too long, don't delay, that's not a shaming thing. It's saying, don't let survival mode write the story of your life, right? You were made for more than reactivity. You were made to walk in wisdom, right? And so now let's turn to the part here where we don't walk in wisdom, right? Proverbs 6, 20 through 29. It's a warning about adultery, but the bigger picture is about seduction, the temptation to step outside God's boundaries for short-term comfort. Right? Proverbs 6:27 says, can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? This is where we must talk about neurobiological impulse loops, right? Because when we're dysregulated, our brains crave something. anything to calm the storm, a person, a habit, a dopamine hit, a hyper focus, something to distract us because we're dysregulated, right? But Proverbs asks, is that moment of relief worth the cost? Right? He who embraces her will not go unpunished. This isn't wrath, it's natural consequence. When we ignore wisdom, we walk away from protection. Right? Let's go look in Genesis 24 at Rebekah. She's not seduced, she's discerning. Right? When Abraham's servant asks for hospitality, she doesn't rush, but she listens. And she watches and she agrees freely, I will go. That's wisdom in motion. Her boundaries were intact and willingness was engaged. So finally, we're going to land here in Psalm 27 from this week, right? David is surrounded, yet he says, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? But the verse I want to leave you with is this. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. That's Psalm 27:14. Because waiting is a form of boundary, right? It says, I will not grasp, I will not rush, I will not open a door God has not opened. And let me tell you, waiting is not weakness. It's one of the strongest things you'll ever do is to sit back and wait. And the world, they may call it passive, but in the kingdom, it's obedience and it's restraint and it's wisdom, right? So here's my thought for this week, my call for you. What boundary do you need to honor this week? Or what restraint do you need to reclaim? Or where have you been ignoring the voice of wisdom? And what would it mean? What would it look like to turn towards it again? God's right there with you. He's not left you. He's given you his word, his spirit, and his people. So let's become women who don't just read wisdom, right? But we live it.